Commander Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the UES Valkyrie, watching the stars through the massive viewing window. The ship had been traveling through empty space for 3 weeks, patrolling the outer edges of human territory. It was quiet. Work, boring even, but Jake preferred it that way. Humanity had enjoyed peace for over 300 years, and he wanted to keep it that way. "Sir, we're receiving a transmission," said Lieutenant Carol Hayes from her station. Her voice carried a note of surprise. "It's not from any human ship," Jake turned around quickly. In all his 15 years of service, he had never heard those words. Humanity had been alone in space for as long as anyone could remember. The history books spoke of other species, but they were ancient stories, myths almost. "Put it on the main screen," Jake ordered. The screen flickered to life, showing a creature unlike anything Jake had ever seen. It was tall and thin, with blue skin that seemed to shimmer in the light. Its eyes were large and golden, and when it spoke, its voice was musical but filled with desperation. "Greetings, children of Earth," the alien said. "I am Ambassador Kef of the Zephrian Collective. We have searched for you for many cycles. We need your help." Captain Lisa Rodriguez stepped forward. She was the ship's diplomatic officer, though she had never expected to use her training. "This is Captain Rodriguez of the United Earthship Valkyrie. We are surprised to hear from you. We thought we were alone." The alien's expression grew more desperate. "You were never alone. Your people chose to leave, to sleep in the outer darkness. But now the ancient enemy has returned. The devourers have awakened, and they consume all in their path. We cannot stop them. Only you can." Jake felt a chill run down his spine. "What do you mean, only we can?" "You are the sleeping gods of war," Kat said. "Your ancestors stood against the endless night and saved us all. Now we beg you to wake from your slumber. The galaxy burns, and only the Guardians can save it." The transmission ended, leaving the bridge in stunned silence. Jake looked around at his crew. They all wore the same expression of confusion and disbelief. "Captain Rodriguez, send a message to Earth Command immediately," Jake said. "Tell them we have made contact with an alien species. Tell them they're asking for our help in a war." Dr. Amanda Foster had been studying alien biology for 20 years, even though no aliens had ever been found. She had always believed they were out there somewhere. Now, as she stood in the Valkyrie science lab, she stared at the data from the transmission with growing excitement and fear. "The biological readings are incredible," she told Jake as he entered the lab. "This creature is definitely not human, but the technology in their transmission is far beyond anything we have." "What?" "About this talk of sleeping gods and guardians?" Jake asked. "Do you think they have us confused with someone else?" Amanda shook her head. "I've been digging through our historical databases. There are gaps, Commander, big gaps. Our records from before the space colonization are incomplete. Almost like someone deliberately removed information." Jake frowned. "That's impossible." "Why? Would anyone hide our own history from us?" "I don't know, but I'm going to find out," Amanda said. "I've requested access to the restricted archives. If there are answers, they'll be there." 3 days later, Amanda got her clearance. What she found in the restricted files made her hands shake as she read. She called Jake to her lab immediately. "Commander, you need to see this," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Our history isn't what we think it is." Jake read the files over her shoulder. The document spoke of wars fought across the galaxy, of human fleets that struck fear into the hearts of alien empires. They described weapons that could crack planets and soldiers who never retreated, never surrendered. "This can't be real," Jake said. "We're explorers, scientists. We've been at peace for centuries." "The dates check out," Amanda said. "According to these files, humanity was exiled from the inner galaxy 3,000 years ago. We agreed to leave and never return. In exchange, the other species promised to handle their own conflicts." "Exiled? Why?" Amanda pulled up another file. "Because we were too good at war. The other species were afraid of us. They called us the gods of war, beings who could end any conflict but who might also end everything else." Jake sat down heavily. So when this Keth talks about sleeping gods, he's talking about us? About what we used to be. It gets worse, Amanda said. I found references to weapons caches hidden throughout the galaxy. Emergency supplies left behind in case the galaxy ever needed us again. Lieutenant Colonel Ryan Hayes had been a soldier his entire adult life. He had trained for wars that never came, prepared for battles that never happened. Now, as he led a team to investigate one of the weapon caches Amanda had discovered, he felt more alive than he had in years. The cache was hidden in an asteroid field, protected by automated systems that recognized human DNA as the airlock opened. Ryan stepped into a facility that took his breath away. The walls were lined with weapons he couldn't identify, their sleek surfaces humming with power. Ships sat in launching bays, their designs both beautiful and terrifying. Everything was maintained perfectly, as if waiting for someone to return. "My God," whispered Sergeant Danny Roberts, one of Ryan's team members. "What is all this?" "This is what we used to be," Ryan said quietly. He approached a weapon that seemed to pulse with inner light. When he touched it, information flooded his mind. He saw battles fought in the darkness between stars, saw human soldiers standing against impossible odds and winning every time. "Sir, you need to see this," called Private Kelly Martinez from across the room. She was standing before a massive screen that had activated at her approach. The screen showed a map of the galaxy with red dots marking the locations of similar caches. "There are hundreds of them," Ryan said. "Weapons, ships, supplies, all waiting for us to come back." As they explored deeper, they found something that made Ryan's blood run cold. It was a room filled with records of their last war, 3,000 years ago. The enemy had been called the Zirithi Empire, a species that enslaved others for sport. The records showed what humanity had done to them. "They didn't just defeat them," Ryan said, reading the reports. "They completely destroyed them. Every ship, every world, every trace of their existence, they wiped them from the galaxy." "Is that why we were exiled?" asked Danny. "No," Ryan said, reading further. "We were exiled because after we destroyed the Zirithi, we kept fighting. We couldn't stop. The other species had to beg us to leave before we destroyed everything." Back on the Valkyrie, Jake received Ryan's report with growing unease. He called a meeting of his senior staff in the conference room. "The situation is clear," he said. "We are not who we thought we were. Our ancestors were warriors, the greatest the galaxy had ever seen. They were so effective at war that other species feared them more than any enemy." But that was 3,000 years ago," said Captain Rodriguez. "We're different now. We've been at peace. Have we?" asked Dr. Foster. "Or have we just been sleeping? The alien called us the sleeping gods of war. What if that's exactly what we are?" Jake looked around the table at his officers. They were good people, dedicated to peace and exploration. But as he studied their faces, he saw something else. Hardness in their eyes, a readiness that had always been there but never needed. "We need to contact Earth," he said. "The government needs to know what we've learned. And we need to decide what we're going to do about these devourers." "What if we say no?" asked Rodriguez. "What if we choose to stay out of this war?" Jake was quiet for a long moment. "Then the galaxy burns, and we'll have that on our conscience forever. But if we say yes, we become what we used to be. We become the gods of war again." The meeting ended in silence. Each officer returned to their duties, but the weight of their discovery hung over them all. Humanity had a choice to make, and the fate of the galaxy hung in the balance. In his quarters that night, Jake stared out at the stars and wondered what his ancestors would have done. The answer, he realized, was simple. They would have fought. They would have protected the innocent, no matter the cost to themselves. The sleeping gods of war were beginning to wake up. The halls of the Earth Council building had never seen such chaos. President Nicole Carter stood at the head of the emergency session, watching as representatives from every human colony argued and shouted. The news from the Valkyrie had shaken the foundations of everything they believed about themselves. "Order!" Nicole called out, her voice cutting through the noise. "We need to discuss this calmly. Our entire understanding of human history has been turned upside down. Senator Robert Kim from the Mars colony stood up. Madam President, with respect, this could all be an elaborate hoax. Aliens asking for our help in a war? It sounds like something from an old movie. The evidence is real, Nicole replied. Commander Morrison's team has found weapons caches throughout the galaxy. Our own technology confirms these are human-made, but far beyond anything we can build today. Dr. Benjamin Clark had been called from the University of Earth to help make sense of the historical records. He was a thin man with gray hair who had spent his life studying the past. Now he stood before the most powerful people in human space, holding files that would change everything. The records are clear, he said, his voice steady despite the enormity of what he was sharing. 3,000 years ago, humanity was not the peaceful species we are today. We were warriors, the most feared military force the galaxy had ever seen. That's impossible, said Admiral Patricia Moore, head of the Earth Defense Force. Our military is designed for defense only. We haven't fought a real war in centuries. Because we agreed never to fight again, Benjamin replied. The other species in the galaxy made us promise. They were more afraid of us than of any enemy they might face. He activated a holographic display showing ancient battle records. The images were brutal and efficient. Human fleets moving through space like schools of deadly fish, cutting through enemy formations with surgical precision. Soldiers who fought with a cold fury that made their enemies surrender rather than face them. The Zirithi Empire controlled half the galaxy, Benjamin continued. They enslaved entire species, destroyed worlds for fun. When they threatened humanity, we didn't just fight back. We erased them from existence. Every ship, every world, every trace of their civilization. The room fell silent. Finally, General Marcus Webb spoke up. He was a career soldier, a man who had trained for wars that never came. How is that possible? We don't have the technology or the mindset for that kind of warfare. Don't we? Benjamin asked. I've been studying our military training methods. Even in peacetime, our soldiers train harder than any species in known history. Our strategy games are more complex, our simulations more realistic. We prepare for war even when we claim to want peace. President Carter felt a chill run down her spine. You're suggesting that we're naturally violent? I'm suggesting that we're naturally good at violence, Benjamin corrected. There's a difference. The records show that humans have something called tactical flexibility. We can adapt to any situation, find solutions that other species can't imagine. In war, that makes us unbeatable. General Webb pulled up his own files. I've been reviewing our current military capabilities. If we activated our full reserves, we could field a force 10 times larger than what we have now. Our industrial capacity is enormous, designed for rapid expansion. Almost like we're always ready to go to war. But we've been at peace for centuries, protested Senator Kim. Have we? Webb asked. Or have we just been waiting? Meanwhile, on the planet New Terra, the Zephrian delegation had arrived. Ambassador Keth stood in the diplomatic quarter surrounded by his advisors. They had traveled for months to reach human space, and what they found surprised them. The humans were not what they had expected. These people seemed gentle, curious about the aliens, but not afraid. They offered food and shelter, asked questions about Zephrian culture and technology. It was hard to believe these were the same species that had once struck terror into the hearts of empires. Are you certain these are the right humans? Asked Sub-Ambassador Reth, Keth's second-in-command. They seem so ... peaceful. They are the children of the Guardians, Keth replied. I can feel it in their presence. But they have forgotten who they are. We must help them remember. Captain Lisa Rodriguez had been assigned to work with the Zephrian delegation. She found them fascinating, their technology and culture so different from humanity's. But she also sensed their desperation. Tell me about these devourers, she said as she sat with Keth in the diplomatic gardens. What exactly are we facing? Keth's golden eyes grew dark. They are not truly alive, not as we understand life. They are hunger given form, a plague that spreads from world to world. They consume not just bodies, but souls. Everything they touch becomes part of them. How did they return? Lisa asked. Your message said they were an ancient enemy. They were defeated long ago, before your ancestors went to sleep, Keth explained. The Guardians drove them back to the dark spaces between galaxies. But they have grown stronger in exile. Now they return with new powers, new hungers. And you can't stop them? Keth's expression was full of shame. We have tried. The collective has fought them for 2 years. We have lost 17 worlds. Our fleets are scattered, our people fleeing in terror. We are not warriors, Captain Rodriguez. We are builders. Farmers, artists, we know nothing of the ways of war. Lisa felt something stir inside her, a feeling she couldn't quite name. What makes you think we can help? We haven't fought a real war in centuries. Because you are the children of the Guardians. Keth said simply. War is in your blood, in your very bones. You may have forgotten, but the galaxy remembers. When the darkness comes, only the Guardians can stand against it. Dr. Amanda Foster had been working around the clock, analyzing the genetic data from the Zephrian delegation. What she found disturbed her more than she wanted to admit. The differences are more significant than I initially thought, she told her research team. Human brain structure is fundamentally different from theirs. We process stress, aggression, and threat assessment in ways that are completely alien to them. What does that mean? Asked Dr. Carl Thompson, her assistant. It means we're built for conflict, Amanda replied. Not just physically, but mentally. Our brains are wired to find tactical solutions, to see patterns that others miss. In peaceful times, this makes us excellent problem solvers. In war, it makes us. She paused, not wanting to finish the sentence. It makes us what? Carl pressed. Apex. Predators, Amanda said quietly. The genetic markers are all there. Enhanced pattern recognition, rapid threat assessment, the ability to enter a state of focused aggression. We're not just good at war, we're designed for it. The implications hit the research team like a physical blow. They were scientists, people, who had dedicated their lives to understanding and preserving life. To learn that humanity was engineered for destruction was almost too much to bear. But we've been peaceful for centuries, Carl said. Surely that proves we've evolved beyond our violent nature? Amanda pulled up a new set of data. Look at these statistics. Human sports are more violent than any other species. Our entertainment focuses on conflict and competition. Our children play games that simulate warfare. We've channeled our aggressive instincts into other activities, but they're still there. Back on the Valkyrie, Commander Jake Morrison received new orders from Earth. He was to escort the Zephrian delegation to the Outer Rim, where they would show him the results of the Devourer attacks. The mission was classified at the highest levels. Are you sure about this, Commander? Asked Lieutenant Carol Hayes as they prepared for departure. If what we've learned is true, this could change everything. That's exactly why we need to see it, Jake replied. If we're going to make a decision about this war, we need to understand what we're facing. The journey to the Outer Rim took 5 days. When they arrived at the first attacked world, Jake understood why the Zephrians were so desperate. The planet below was gray and lifeless, covered in a strange organic growth that pulsed with sickly light. This was Kelros Prime, Keth explained, home to 50 million Kelrosians. They were a peaceful people, known throughout the galaxy for their music and art. What happened to them? Jake asked, though he wasn't sure he wanted to know. They became food, Keth said simply. The Devourers consume everything. Matter, energy, consciousness. The planet itself is now part of their collective. Hunger. Jake stared at the dead world and felt something he hadn't experienced in years. It was rage, pure and simple. Not the hot anger of a moment, but the cold fury of someone who had seen too much. Show me the next world, he said. They visited 3 more dead planets. Each one told the same story. Thriving civilizations reduced to gray organic matter, billions of lives consumed by an enemy that knew no mercy. By the time they returned to human space, Jake had made his decision. "Send a message to Earth," he told his communications officer. "Tell them we've seen enough. The sleeping gods of war are ready to wake up." The message reached Earth just as President Carter was meeting with the full council. When she read Jake's report, she knew that humanity stood at a crossroads. They could remain the peaceful species they had become, or they could embrace their forgotten nature and become the guardians the galaxy desperately needed. The emergency session of the Earth Council lasted for 18 hours. President Nicole Carter had not slept in 2 days, but she knew that the decision they made in this room would echo through history. The reports from Commander Morrison were spread across the table like pieces of a horrible puzzle. "The situation is worse than we imagined," Nicole said to the assembled leaders. "The Devourers have consumed 23 worlds in the past year alone. If they continue at this rate, they'll reach the core systems within a decade." Senator Robert Kim looked pale as he studied the images of dead worlds. "How do we know we can stop them? Even if we are these sleeping gods of war, that was 3,000 years ago. We're different now, are we?" asked General Marcus Webb. He had been reviewing military readiness reports all morning. "I've been analyzing our current capabilities. Every human colony has military production facilities. Our civilian ships can be converted to warships in weeks. Our population has combat training as part of basic education. We say we're peaceful, but we're the most prepared species in the galaxy." Dr. Benjamin Clark stood up from his chair. The historian looked exhausted, but his eyes burned with purpose. "I've found something else in the archives. The reason we were so effective in the old wars wasn't just our technology or our tactics, it was our psychology. Humans have something called adaptive aggression. We can become exactly as violent as we need to be." "What does that mean?" asked Admiral Patricia Moore. "It means we escalate to match any threat," Benjamin explained. "Against a peaceful enemy, we might show mercy. Against the Zirathi, who enslaved worlds, we became destroyers. Against the Devourers, who consume everything, we would become—" He paused, the implications hanging in the air. "We would become whatever we need to be to stop them," Nicole finished. "The question is whether we're willing to pay that price." The vote was closer than anyone expected. In the end, it passed by a single vote. Humanity would go to war. Captain Alex Turner had volunteered for the first reconnaissance mission into Devourer space. He commanded the UES Falcon, a fast scout ship that had been hastily upgraded with weapons from the ancient caches. As they approached the edge of the infected zone, Alex felt his heart racing with anticipation. "Sensors are picking up movement," reported Lieutenant Janet Walsh from her station. "Multiple contacts heading our way." Alex studied the tactical display. The Devourer ships were unlike anything in human databases. They moved like living things, flowing through space with organic grace. Their hulls seemed to pulse with the same sickly light they had seen on the dead worlds. "All stop," Alex ordered. "Let's see what they do." The enemy ships surrounded the Falcon, but they didn't attack immediately. Instead, they seemed to be studying the human vessel. Alex could feel something probing at the edges of his mind, a cold presence that made his skin crawl. "Sir, they're trying to communicate," Janet reported. "But it's not like normal communication. They're trying to get inside our heads." Alex felt it too now, a whisper at the back of his mind. The voice was made of hunger and desperation, promising him power if he would just let it in. He gritted his teeth and pushed the presence away. "They're trying to convert us," he realized. "That's how they work. They don't just destroy, they corrupt." The Devourer ships began to move closer, their hull patterns shifting like breathing skin. Alex knew they had seconds before the enemy tried to board them. "All weapons, fire at will," he ordered. The Falcon's weapons came alive. Ancient human technology meeting alien hunger. The results were immediate and devastating. The Devourer ships weren't prepared for the focused destruction that humans could deliver. In minutes, 3 enemy vessels were drifting wreckage, but Alex had seen something that chilled him. As the Devourer ships died, they had screamed, not with voices but with pure mental anguish. These weren't just ships. They were alive, thinking beings that had been consumed and converted into weapons. "Get us out of here," Alex ordered. "We need to report back immediately." Colonel Grace Miller had been chosen to establish humanity's first war command center. In 3 centuries. The facility was built into an asteroid, hidden from enemy sensors but connected to every human world. As she watched the tactical displays showing enemy movements, Grace felt the weight of responsibility settling on her shoulders. "The reconnaissance reports are coming in," she told her staff. "Captain Turner's mission confirms what we suspected. The Devourers don't just consume matter, they consume consciousness. Every ship they build, every weapon they create, is powered by the minds of their victims." The room fell silent. The implications were staggering. They weren't just fighting an enemy. They were fighting the corrupted souls of billions of innocent beings. "How do we fight something like that?" asked Major Kevin Brown, her intelligence. "Officer, the same way our ancestors fought the Zerathi," Grace replied. "We become what we need to be to win." She pulled up a new display showing human military assets. Ships were being built in hidden yards throughout the galaxy. Weapons were being distributed to every colony. Most importantly, volunteers were signing up faster than they could be processed. "The aliens were right about one thing," Grace said. "War is in our blood. Our people aren't running from this fight. They're running toward it." Dr. Stephen Parker had been working with Zephrian scientists to understand the enemy better. What they had discovered was worse than anyone had imagined. The Devourers weren't just a species. They were a disease, a corruption that spread through the galaxy like a plague. "The original Devourers died out millions of years ago," he explained to the Joint Research Team. "What we're facing now is their legacy, a biological weapon that turns entire civilizations into extensions of itself. But how do we stop it?" asked Dr. Yeth, the lead Zephrian scientist. "Our weapons barely scratch. They're ships. Our defenses cannot hold them back." Stephen pulled up a human genetic analysis. "The answer might be in our biology. Humans have natural resistance to mental intrusion. When the Devourers try to corrupt us, our minds fight back automatically. That's why the old Guardians were so effective," realized Dr. Yeth. "They were immune to the Devourer's primary weapon." "Not immune," Stephen corrected. "Resistant. And that resistance comes with a price. The same mental barriers that protect us from corruption also make us capable of extreme violence. We can shut off empathy, compassion, even fear when we need to." The implications were clear. To fight the Devourers, humanity would have to become monsters. The question was whether they would be able to find their way back to being human afterward. Major Danny Roberts led the first human strike team to make contact with the enemy. They had located a small Devourer outpost on a dead moon, a perfect target for testing human capabilities. As his team prepared for the assault, Danny felt something he had never experienced before. It was like waking up from a long dream. Every instinct, every reflex, every thought was focused on the coming battle. His mind was clear, his purpose absolute. For the first time in his life, Danny understood what he was meant to be. "Remember," he told his team, "these aren't just enemies. They're the corrupted remains of innocent people. We're not just fighting for victory, we're fighting to set them free." The assault began at dawn. Human soldiers moved through the Devourer base like ghosts, their weapons cutting through enemy defenses with surgical precision. The Devourers tried to corrupt them, to turn them into allies, but the humans' minds were closed to their influence. The battle lasted exactly 43 minutes. When it was over, the Devourer outpost was nothing but smoking ruins. But Danny had seen something in the final moments that would haunt him forever. As the last enemy died, he had felt its relief. Death was a mercy compared to the endless hunger it had been forced to endure. "Command, this is Strike Team Alpha," Danny reported. "Mission accomplished. The enemy is neutralized." But as he looked around at his team, he saw the change in their eyes. They had tasted war for the first time, and they liked it. The sleeping gods of war were waking up, and Danny wasn't sure they would ever be able to go back to sleep, back on Earth. "President," Carter received the battle reports with mixed emotions. The humans had won their first engagement, but the cost was already becoming clear. The soldiers who returned from the battle were different, harder. They moved with a predatory grace that made even their own people uncomfortable. "We're becoming what we need to be," she told her advisors. "But I wonder if we'll recognize ourselves when this is over." The Zephrian delegation had been watching the humans prepare for war with a mixture of hope and fear. They had asked the sleeping gods to wake up, but now they were seeing what that really meant. "They are magnificent," Ambassador Keth said as he watched human warships leave port. "But they are also terrible. I begin to understand why the galaxy asked them to sleep. Will they be able to stop the Devourers?" asked Sub-Ambassador Reth. Keth was quiet for a long moment. "Yes," he said finally, "they will stop them. But the galaxy will never be the same. The Guardians are awake, and they will reshape everything in their image." As the human fleet moved toward the front lines, the galaxy held its breath. The sleeping gods of war were fully awake now, and they were ready to remind the universe why. They had been feared for 3,000 years. The real war was about to begin. Fleet Admiral Jennifer Walsh stood on the bridge of the Use Ragnarok, the largest warship humanity had ever built. The massive vessel stretched for 12 kilometers, its hull bristling with weapons that could crack moons. Around her, the human armada filled space like a swarm of metal predators. 300 ships, each one a masterpiece of destructive engineering. "Admiral, we're receiving reports from the front lines," said Captain Tony Davis, her communications officer. "The Devourers have consumed 3 more worlds in the past week. They're accelerating their advance." Jennifer studied the tactical display showing enemy movements. The Devourers were no longer content to consume worlds slowly. They had realized that humanity was mobilizing and were racing to devour as much as possible before the human fleet arrived. "How long until we reach the battle zone?" she asked. 6 hours, Admiral, replied Navigator Helen Cooper. Jennifer nodded. 6 hours until humanity reminded the galaxy why they had once been feared above all others. She looked around the bridge at her officers. Each one wore the same expression of cold determination. The transformation was complete. They were no longer explorers or peacekeepers. They were weapons of war. "Signal all ships," she ordered. "Prepare for combat operations. No mercy, no quarter. We end this today." Commander Peter Brooks led the assault on Zarian Prime, a world that had been completely consumed by the Devourers 3 months earlier. The planet's surface writhed with organic growth, pulsing with the heartbeats of 1 billion consumed souls. It was the enemy's primary breeding facility, where they created new ships and weapons from the matter of dead civilizations. "Sensors are showing massive enemy presence," reported Lieutenant Karen Williams from her station. "Thousands of ships in orbit, and the entire planetary surface is active." Peter felt no fear, only the cold calculation of a predator sizing up its prey. "Begin orbital bombardment. Target the largest concentrations of enemy biomass." The human fleet opened fire with weapons that had been sleeping for 3,000 years. Beams of pure energy lanced down from space, burning away the organic growth like a cleansing fire. The planet's surface erupted in explosions that could be seen from orbit, but the Devourers fought back. Their ships rose from the planet's surface, like angry wasps moving with organic grace toward the human fleet. They tried to corrupt the human crews, sending waves of mental interference that had broken other species. The attacks bounced off human minds like water off stone. Peter felt the alien presence trying to claw its way into his thoughts, promising him power and eternal life if he would just surrender. He laughed and pushed the voice away. "Is that the best you can do?" he said aloud. "Our ancestors faced worse enemies than you." The space battle that followed became legendary. Human ships moved through the enemy formations like dancers, their weapons cutting through Devourer vessels with surgical precision. Every shot was calculated, every maneuver designed for maximum destruction. The enemy had numbers, but humans had something more valuable. They had the ability to think, to adapt, to find weakness where none seemed to exist. Within hours, the orbital defenses were shattered, and the assault teams were landing on the planet's surface. Dr. Samantha Gray had volunteered to accompany the ground forces to study the enemy's biology. What she found on Zarian Prime would haunt her for the rest of her life. The entire planet had been converted into a living organism, its cities and forests replaced by pulsing organic structures that breathed and moved. The conversion process is more complete than we thought, she reported to the assault team commander. The planet itself is alive now. Every rock, every grain of sand has been incorporated into the Devourer Collective. Can we reverse it? Asked Major Scott Turner, who led the ground assault. Samantha studied her readings, her heart sinking with each new discovery. No, the integration is complete. The only way to stop this planet from producing more Devourers is to destroy it entirely. The implications hit the assault team like a physical blow. They weren't just fighting to liberate a world. They were fighting to put it out of its misery. Then that's what we'll do, Scott said grimly. Place the charges. We're going to mercy kill a planet. Captain Eric Johnson commanded the Liberation fleet heading toward the Zephrian homeworld. Intelligence reports indicated that the Devourers had reached the planet 2 weeks earlier and were in the process of consuming its population. If they arrived too late, there would be nothing left to save. Emergency transmission from the surface, reported his communications officer, its Ambassador Keth. The signal was weak and filled with static, but Keth's voice came through clearly. Human ships, if you can hear this, please hurry. The Devourers have taken our capital city. They are converting our people. We cannot hold much longer. Eric felt something stir in his chest, an emotion he hadn't experienced since the transformation began. It was compassion, mixed with rage at seeing innocents suffer. All ships maximum speed. We're going to save them. The human fleet dropped out of hyperspace directly above the Zephrian homeworld. The scene below was horrific. Half the planet was covered in the gray organic growth of the Devourers. Cities were being consumed in real time, their populations screaming as they were converted into living weapons. Begin planetary assault, Eric ordered. Target the conversion centers. Avoid populated areas if possible. The battle for the Zephrian homeworld lasted 3 days. Human ships fought with a precision that amazed even themselves, striking at Devourer positions while carefully avoiding civilian areas. On the ground, human soldiers moved through converted cities like avenging angels, their weapons cutting through enemy forces with brutal efficiency. But it was the rescued civilians who provided the most shocking testimony. The Zephrians who had been partially converted spoke of the horror of losing control of their own minds, of being forced to watch as their bodies were used to attack their own families. Thank you, Keth said to Eric as they stood in the ruins of the Zephrian capital. You have saved what remains of our people. Eric looked around at the devastation. Nearly half the planet's population was gone, consumed or converted by the enemy. We should have arrived sooner. You arrived in time, Keth replied. That is what matters. You are truly the guardians we remembered, but Eric could see the fear in Keth's eyes. The Zephrians were grateful to be saved, but they were also terrified of their saviors. The humans who had liberated them moved with predatory grace, their eyes cold and calculating. They had become something new, something that even their allies feared. Meanwhile, Dr. Samantha Gray had made a breakthrough in understanding the Devourer's weakness. Working with samples from the liberated worlds, she had discovered something that changed everything. The hive mind has a fatal flaw, she explained to a gathering of military commanders. It's designed to dominate peaceful species, to overwhelm them with superior mental force, but it can't process true predatory intelligence. What does that mean? Asked General Marcus Webb. It means that when faced with opponents who genuinely enjoy combat, who find satisfaction in destruction, the hive mind becomes confused. It doesn't understand how to corrupt beings who are already comfortable with violence. So our transformation into warriors isn't just making us effective fighters, realized Admiral Walsh. It's making us immune to their primary weapon. Exactly. Samantha confirmed. The more we embrace our nature as weapons of war, the less they can affect us. But there's a cost. Every battle makes us harder, more violent, less human. The room fell silent as the implications sank in. To defeat the Devourers, humanity had to sacrifice its own soul. The final push toward the Devour core systems began. A month later, the human armada had grown to over 1,000 ships, each one crewed by beings who barely resembled the peaceful explorers they had once been. They moved through space like a plague of destruction, consuming enemy fleets and liberating dead worlds, but with each victory they became more like the thing they were fighting. The rescued civilians whispered among themselves about the human saviors who showed no emotion, who killed without hesitation, who seemed to enjoy the act of destruction itself. Admiral Walsh stood on her bridge, watching as another devourer world burned beneath their weapons. She felt nothing but satisfaction at the sight. The enemy was being driven back, their fleets scattered, their worlds cleansed of corruption. "Admiral, we're receiving surrender broadcasts from several Devourer ships," reported her communications officer. "Ignore them," Walsh replied without hesitation. "There can be no surrender, no mercy. We end this completely." As the human fleet moved deeper into enemy territory, the galaxy watched in a mixture of awe and terror. The sleeping gods of war had awakened, and they were reshaping the universe in their image. The Devourers were being defeated, but at what cost? The final battle was approaching, and when it was over, nothing would ever be the same again. The Guardians had returned, but they were no longer the beings who had once chosen exile over endless war. They had become something new, something that even they themselves didn't fully understand. The sleeping gods of war were fully awake now, and they would not go back to sleep until every last enemy was destroyed. The Devourer home system was unlike anything the human fleet had ever encountered. At its center lay a massive planet that pulsed with malevolent life, its surface covered in organic structures that reached into space like grasping fingers. This was the source of the infection, the heart of the enemy's power. Admiral Jennifer Walsh stood on the bridge of the Ragnarok, studying the tactical displays. Around the planet, millions of Devourer ships waited in perfect formation. They knew the humans were coming and had gathered every vessel they possessed for this final battle. "Sensors are detecting something at the planet's core," reported Captain Tony Davis. "It's massive, Admiral. Whatever it is, it's been growing for thousands of years." Jennifer felt a cold certainty settle in her mind. That's the Queen Mind, the original consciousness that started all of this. If we destroy it, the entire Devourer network will collapse. "How do we get through that fleet?" asked her tactical officer. "They outnumber us 1,000 to 1. Jennifer smiled, and the expression was terrifying to see. "We do what humans do best. We find a way to win." The battle began with a single shot from the Ragnarok's main cannon. The beam of energy lanced across space and destroyed a Devourer command ship in a burst of brilliant light. It was the signal the human fleet had been waiting for. What followed was the greatest space battle in galactic history. Human ships moved through the enemy formations like wolves among sheep, their weapons cutting down Devourer vessels with methodical precision. The enemy had numbers, but humans had something more valuable. They had the will to win at any cost. "Enemy ships are trying to ram us," reported the helm officer. "Let them come," Jennifer replied. "Our armor is stronger than their desperation." The Devourer ships crashed against human shields and broke apart like waves against rocks. The human fleet pressed forward, leaving a trail of destruction behind them. Every enemy vessel they encountered was utterly annihilated, their crews given no chance to surrender or retreat. Colonel Tracy Adams led the ground assault on the Queen Mind's nest. The planet's surface was a nightmare of organic growth, with structures that moved and breathed like living things. As her transport ship landed, Tracy could feel the presence of the Queen Mind pressing against her thoughts. "Remember your training," she told her assault team over the communication system. "The Queen will try to break your minds. Don't let her in." The advance through the planet's surface was like walking through the digestive system of a massive creature. The ground beneath their feet pulsed with alien heartbeats, and the air was thick with spores that tried to invade their bodies. But human technology protected them, and their minds remained closed to the enemy's influence. "Contact front," called Sergeant Kevin Martinez as shapes emerged from the organic walls. "Multiple hostiles approaching." The enemies they faced were the most horrible yet. These were the remains of species that had been consumed eons ago, their bodies twisted into weapons by the Queen Mind's will. They moved with inhuman speed and struck with desperate fury, but they were no match for human soldiers, who had embraced their nature as weapons of war. Tracy's team cut through the defenders like a knife through flesh. Every enemy that fell was put down permanently. Their suffering finally ended. Tracy felt no satisfaction in the killing, only the cold necessity of completing the mission. "We're approaching the core chamber," she reported. "Whatever's in there. It's big." The Queen Mind's chamber was a vast cavern filled with pulsing organic machinery. At its center sat a creature that defied description, a mass of flesh and consciousness that had been growing for millions of years. When it spoke, its voice filled their minds with the weight of eons. "So the Guardians have returned?" the Queen Mind said. "I wondered when you would awaken from your slumber." Tracy raised her weapon, but the creature continued speaking. "Do you know what you have become, little Guardian? You think you are saving the galaxy, but you are only replacing one evil with another. I consume to survive. You destroy because you enjoy it." "Maybe," Tracy replied, "but at least our evil has limits." She pulled the trigger. The destruction of the Queen Mind sent shockwaves through the entire Devourer network. Across the galaxy, enemy ships suddenly stopped moving as the consciousness that controlled them died. Converted worlds began to collapse. As the organic growth that covered them withered and died in space, Admiral Walsh watched as the enemy fleet simply shut down. Millions of ships drifted helplessly as their crews, finally freed from the Queen Mind's control, realized what they had become. Many chose to destroy themselves rather than live with the memories of what they had done. "Admiral, we're receiving surrender signals from the remaining Devourer forces," reported her communications officer. Walsh was quiet for a long moment. The old her, the peaceful explorer she had once been, would have accepted the surrender. But that person was gone, replaced by something harder and more practical. "Begin cleanup operations," she ordered. "No survivors." The systematic destruction of the remaining Devourer forces took 3 days. Human ships moved through the debris field, ensuring that nothing remained of the enemy fleet. It was thorough, efficient, and utterly without mercy. When it was over, the galaxy was silent. President Nicole Carter stood before the Galactic Council 6 months later. Addressing representatives from every surviving species, the chamber was filled with beings who looked at her with a mixture of gratitude and fear. "The Devourer threat has been eliminated," she announced. "The galaxy is safe." Ambassador Keth of the Zephrian Collective rose to speak. "We are grateful for your sacrifice, President Carter. But we must ask, what happens now? Your people have become something new, something that frightens us." Nicole looked around the chamber at the faces of beings whose worlds humanity had saved. She could see the fear in their eyes, the understanding that their saviors were now more dangerous than the enemy they had defeated. "We face a choice," she said. "We can return to our exile, go back to the outer darkness and sleep again, or we can remain active, serve as guardians to prevent future threats." "And if we choose the first option?" asked the Altarian representative. "Then you're on your own if something like this happens again," Nicole replied bluntly. "We won't wake up a second time." The debate that followed lasted for weeks. Some species wanted the humans to leave, fearing what they might become if they remained active. Others argued that the galaxy needed guardians, beings capable of standing against threats that peaceful civilizations could not handle. In the end, it was Commander Jake Morrison who proposed the solution. He had returned from the war, changed like all the others, harder and more dangerous than the explorer he had once been. But he had also retained something that many had lost, the ability to see beyond the immediate conflict. "We'll take positions throughout the galaxy," he suggested. not as conquerors or rulers but as watchers. We'll monitor for threats and respond when needed, but we won't interfere with normal galactic affairs. And how do we know you won't become the very thing you fought against? Asked the Centauran representative. Jake was quiet for a moment, considering the question. Because we remember what we used to be. And maybe, with time, we can find our way back to being human again. The arrangement that emerged from the negotiations became known as the Guardian Compact. Human fleets would be stationed at key points throughout the galaxy, ready to respond to existential threats. In exchange, they would have no political authority and would not interfere in the internal affairs of other species. Dr. Amanda Foster recorded the final entry in her research logs as the human fleet took up their new positions. "We set out to save the galaxy from the Devourers," she wrote. "In the end, we may have saved it from something worse ourselves, but the cost was our souls. The sleeping gods of war are awake now, and they cannot return to slumber. We have become the guardians the galaxy needs, but we are no longer the people we once were. Perhaps that is the price of victory. Perhaps it is the price of responsibility." Commander Morrison stood on the bridge of the Valkyrie, now rechristened as a Guardian vessel. Around him, his crew went about their duties with the efficient precision of weapons that had been sharpened to perfection. They were no longer explorers or scientists. They were guardians, watchers in the darkness, ready to defend the galaxy against any threat. But sometimes, in quiet moments, Jake remembered what it felt like to look at the stars with wonder instead of calculation. He remembered when humanity dreamed of discovery rather than destruction. Those memories were precious now, reminders of what they had sacrificed to become what the galaxy needed. The sleeping gods of war had awakened, and they would never sleep again. But perhaps, with time and effort, they could learn to dream of peace once more. The galaxy was safe, protected by beings who had given up their humanity to save it, and in the vast darkness between the stars, the Guardians watched and waited, ready to face whatever threats might emerge from the endless night.